Hello, everyone, and welcome to our fourth, I guess, weekly live stream. Big thank you to everyone that's joining us today. If you are indeed watching this in real time or in the, video on demand later on. We've got a whole host of things we're talking about. I think the most interesting set of topics that we've had so far. We've got the legalization of weed, and we're gonna have a chit chat about that, and basically whether we support it or not, and the kind of nuances on that debate, because the House has obviously recently voted to legalize it. We're talking about the Me Too movement and their hypocrisy, and well, I guess that's something we've not even really touched on at all in any video up to now, so it'd be kind of interesting to chat about that. Of course, we have now we're seeing the effects of the defund the police movement and what's happened in councils across the country after they voted to remove funds, particularly in places like Minneapolis. And shock horror, we're seeing a surge in crime now, which I don't think anyone expected. So having a look at what's been happening in Minneapolis there, which is really interesting. And then, of course, week to week, that sort of day-to-day video is generally talking, because it dominates the headlines, it's generally talking about fraud. We haven't really touched that too much on the Senate races in Georgia, which are massively important, obviously. I mean, they are in many ways as important as the presidential election. I mean, maybe even more important now than the presidential election is. But they are still being overshadowed, I think, by the whole fraud situation. So, was there, wasn't there sort of talk that's happening every single day with the fraud. And then last but not least, Section 230 is going to be our last topic, which we've recently had Tulsi Gabbard coming out in support with Trump. I'm sure she's riled up a number of Democrats. It's funny because they're all just probably thinking, oh, Tulsi Gabbard, why doesn't she just join the Republican Party already? The reality is she's still incredibly left-wing, I think, overall. So it's just such a weird situation. But I think, ultimately she just speaks a lot of sense. Although, obviously, we, of course, don't agree on many, perhaps more of the economic policies. So,
I mean, it's the curse of the centre, isn't it?
Yeah.
You get damned by the left and you get damned by the right, no matter what, because you've not violently swung 100% behind either side. So, should we give it a couple of minutes then, just to let everybody get into the stream and everything? Welcome to everyone joining us. How are you all doing? Let us know in the chat. How are you doing, Jan? Have you got your Christmas decorations up yet?
I haven't yet. No, not got around to it.
Have you not?
Not got around to it. Been a little bit ill. I don't have coronavirus, I don't think, but I have, shall we say, mild flu-like type symptoms, but not so bad. So I've been a little bit distracted by that illness, shall we say, in a minute. But
get well soon.
Yeah, but Christmas decorations, yeah. I mean, I do enjoy a good Christmas tree, but I don't know. I don't actually, on my street there's a giant Santa, like an actual giant Santa, lit up, blow up Santa in someone's front garden. So now people are walking past there all day, walking their dogs, and everyone stops every time I've gone past there and there's someone else. They're stopping to take a picture. So I wonder if they're regretting now. They're just trying to watch TV or something in their front room, in their living room, and every 5 minutes someone comes by and starts staring in and taking pictures. So,
no, definitely not. That's part of the magic and fun of Christmas. Although, actually, okay, so it seems to be talking about Christmas. Have you seen? And this is a bit of extra bonus content for you stream viewers and VOD viewers. Have you seen the BBC have finally succeeded in banning Fairy Tale of New York?
Oh, has it happened now?
Well, it's not entirely banned, but Radio 3 are choosing not to air it. And then they have this thing where people can choose to choose certain versions of it. And for those who don't know, like perhaps if you're in America or something, Fairy Tale of New York is a massively popular Christmas song. It rivals Mariah Carey, doesn't it, in terms of popularity? It's a beautiful little song about kind of these destitute people at Christmas time, and they're like kind of finding, I don't know, they're just having a Christmas, right? Like, and it's uplifting. But in one of the lyrics, they use the words "you scumbag, you maggot, you cheap, lousy faggot," and it's very problematic. And they've been trying to ban it for years and years and years, like since we were kids. Surely, like I'm not sure if you remember the first time you heard about this, but I didn't even know what a faggot was. Like when I first heard it,
that's a bundle of sticks, isn't it? But
yeah, exactly. Oh no, it's like a meatball, right? Like,
yeah, so I didn't know. I mean, I know they're always trying. I don't know.
it gets tiresome, does it? Every Christmas, it's just
it does. But the problem is, it's just such a great song. That's what's annoying. Is that it's actually a great song. It is my favorite Christmas song by some margin. I think it has it all in there. I don't know how popular it is in other parts of the world because the band Pogues are Irish. Well, they are Irish. The singer's English, I think, actually, but they're basically an Irish band. Obviously, band is like kind of Irish type folk type music and whatnot. So I don't actually know how. I wonder if it's popular in parts of America where people are kind of proud of their Irish heritage, like the Joe Bidens of the world. I wonder if Joe Biden listens to. I mean, I hope not, because it would certainly impact my opinions. Yeah, my opinion on the song. But
are you going to cancel the Pogues because you don't like the political leanings of those who listen to it?
Yeah, maybe. Why not? That's what the left do, right?
Yeah, let's just take the gloves off. Fire with fire. Should we get on with it then?
Let's get on with it. So we have this from. Oh, wait a minute. We're not even on the screen. 1 second. There we go. So we have this from Vice, which I don't know if you've ever looked at a Vice article before. I don't recommend it. Actually, you know what? I was going to say I do recommend it because it's always good to go and have a look and see what the people with conflicting views to yourself are writing and talking about, because you want to know their argument. You want to know it deep in, deep out. You want to make sure you're not actually arguing against a straw man. So I often go and visit places like Vice, maybe not so much Vice, but like Huffington Post or whatever, or Washington Times, and just see what they're talking about, so I can actually understand their argument. But
look, the Vice do some genuinely good like investigative reporting, because it's kind of like 50-50 content, right? Like 50% of it is like super interesting, looks at, I don't know, like they embed someone in a militia somewhere, right? Or and 50% of it is the white man the biggest evil? Like, who is worse, Adolf Hitler or a straight white man? Like,
yeah. It's quite lazy, really, isn't it? But no, I know what you mean, because I remember seeing all sorts of Vice stuff where they'd go to like Cambodia or something, and like really put the spotlight on, like this low tier like drug production and stuff like that. I remember seeing one thing on like cocaine and how they make cocaine or whatever and all this kind of stuff. And it is interesting, and it's really cool for someone to go and take the risk to be out there, because they are putting their lives at risk. So you are right, they've done some good stuff, but it seems more often than not when I see something from Vice now, it's about
Stunning and brave.
Yeah, it's like, here's why white people should all be rounded up in camps or something. And it's like, nah. I don't know. Not for me. But yeah.
Not our cup of tea. We'll stick with Breitbart and away and then.
Exactly. So, yeah, I mean, listen, I'll just, for anyone that doesn't know, basically the House voted to legalize weed, because at a federal level, not really much has happened. But so the House voted to decriminalize cannabis.
Cannibalism?
Well, you should hope it's already illegal. Sorry. Yeah, you should hope that they're not voting to decriminalize. I don't know. Listen, that's something I could see happening actually. Just the left coming out and saying like, cannibalists' lives matter. And obviously the irony in that is.
It's a protected cultural thing. It's how dare you colonialists turn up and tell us not to cannibalize?
Exactly. Eating fruit and veg is a whitewashed Western idea. Actually, it's a social construct. The natural thing is that we eat each other. But yeah. So the House voted to decriminalise cannabis, a historic, symbolic moment making Congress' belated move towards embracing the views held by a large majority of Americans. The House voted to pass the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act, what a name, Expungement Act on Friday, the first time either chamber of Congress has ever voted on marijuana decriminalisation. The final vote was 228 to 164, with most Democrats joined by 5 Republicans and an independent to pass the legislation. Most Republicans and 6 Democrats opposed the bill. The bill is a major symbolic victory for marijuana rights advocates and criminal justice reform, but it's not likely going anywhere anytime soon. Senate Republicans have indicated there's no appetite to pass the measure. So obviously, it's not going to pass the Senate, is it? I don't think. But because there's probably a couple of Democrats that would vote against, and there's probably a couple of Republicans that might vote for, but I think ultimately, like, that Republican majority will prevent it from happening, because obviously it's weird. It's weird because I actually see this is one of the issues, I think, and I'm not saying that I'll get onto my own views as we're talking about it, but I think that this is one where the Republican Party is quite detached from the sort of general consensus of their voters, because I don't think most Republican voters actually care about weed being decriminalized or not.
No. Well, it's quite divisive for conservatives, isn't it? Because you have at the same time people like me, and I'm a kind of a free marketer. I don't believe that the state should be really getting involved that much. Okay, maybe if people are selling literal poison to people, maybe we should get involved. But I kind of trust people to make their own decisions. I don't want the state telling me what I can and can't buy. I live in a socialist country, Belgium, and they decree that I'm allowed to go into a shop but not down certain aisles at the moment. Okay, I don't like that. So you kind of have that kind of economic conservatism, and then you have the social conservatism too, right? And these are people who kind of care about, introducing an addictive substance onto the market, and it's a completely valid perspective. But it is at odds with each other, and it will probably divide the conservative movement for a while, won't it? But I don't know. How do you think that's going to go?
I think we're moving towards a decriminalization of most drugs. I think that's basically where most Western countries will eventually go. And I think the kind of general sentiment that people minding their own business, taking whatever drugs in the privacy of their own home, I don't really see that much of an issue with it. Now, it's not to say that I don't think that weed is bad, because for the most part, I'm sure there's many people who just use marijuana recreationally, and obviously and it has medicinal purposes as well. There's no doubt about that. But I also think that a lot of people who kind of get into smoking weed a lot, and we just kind of like call them like potheads here. I don't know what they call them in America, but we just kind of like call them potheads. And there's just not an ounce. Well, okay, I guess it depends person to person, but I guess this opinion is quite controversial, I'm sure, but I don't really see, like, smoking marijuana like recreationally every now and again is fine, but people that smoke it almost like every day tend to really lack any motivation to actually go and do things in their life and trying to better themselves. I don't think they're very productive in the world, and that's basically a bad thing.
Yeah, I mean, people, people tend to underestimate the real damage that that cannabis can do, don't they? So, for example, I have a family member who smoked weed pretty much every day since he was like 14 or something like that. And the guy's a wreck. Like, he's a natural wreck. He can't do like simple mathematics. Like, if you ask him to like take two forks and put them on the table, he struggles to do tasks like that. So yeah, like it's the same with everything, isn't it? Because all excesses are bad. If you eat sugar, if you eat like 12 donuts every day for your entire life, then you're probably going to be so big you can't get out of the chair, right? And it's the same thing with marijuana. If you smoke 2-3 joints a day for the rest of your life, you're probably going to like not be able to get out of the chair again because you're actually just too thick to do that. So I don't think it's really an argument for either way to ban it, the dangers of it, because people are aware of the dangers. As long as people are aware of the dangers, they should be able to decide for themselves whether they want to expose it to the danger. And there are probably some medicinal benefits to it. People are stressed out and stuff. Well, I don't know. I say let them do it, man.
Well, there's basically some certain medical condition. I can't remember exactly what it is. I did read about it quite a lot back in the day, but there's certain medical conditions where basically, for whatever reason, what's it called? Is it THC? I can't remember. The stuff that basically the sort of key component, the key chemical in weed that gives the effects that it does, reduces their pain level essentially. And obviously it's better than opiates, obviously. I think you probably rather if someone can kind of remove pain from their life smoking weed, as opposed to using some like opioid, like I don't know, like Vicodin or something like that, then that's probably, I would say, better. So I think it should be allowed for medical purposes just about anywhere. But I just think for me, like, the issue is, forget about the drugs. It's more just about the idea of throwing someone into prison, just what they're doing in their own home, like smoking a drug in their own home. I don't think that's right. Like, I think you should be going, to some extent, you should be going after, like, big time dealers and stuff like this, people who because of all the other crimes that come along, because of all of the negative factors that come along with dealing drugs. Like, because you're not just dealing drugs, it starts things like gang violence. So you get like young kids, becoming dealers on street corners, and getting into all sorts of violence and this kind of thing. Like, the drug is just the one thing, but it then starts a whole cloud of crime around it, and it's just bad for communities and neighborhoods. Obviously, if you've got someone in the local area that's like a big time drug dealer or whatever, because they just bring loads of crime with them. So that's my issue. But I don't think you should be going after just people who are like drug addicts or whatever in their own home when it comes to things like, heroin or whatever. Obviously, weed isn't anywhere near as addictive, but I do think psychologically it really gets a hold and a grip on people. Like you say, I know plenty of people that smoked it from a very, very young age, and they're still doing it now, like 20 years later. And, I feel pretty confident, had they not been smoking weed every day of their life, that their life might be a lot different. So I don't know. I think it's
we have mutual friends. They started smoking weed like when we were in school together, and they kind of still do the same thing now as they did like 10 years ago when we leave school, right? And it's just a bit like,
yeah, definitely. So I think people, like, I get the argument, weed is not as bad as heroin or even as bad as alcohol. Like, alcohol's worse, right? But I also think people have a tendency to downplay just how much of a negative impact it can have on someone's life. Maybe not necessarily it's gonna, destroy their liver or something like it would an alcoholic, but certainly like has mental effects. And I mean, I know plenty of people who now, have all sorts of kind of like paranoia and anxiety and panic attacks and this kind of thing, just that have come from smoking weed a lot during their life. So, yeah, so I don't know. I support decriminalization, but I still think that I don't think that we should try to, make these drugs not seem, like they're that dangerous, because they actually are. They can really destroy someone's life without you realizing it. Very slowly destroy and eat away at every single little bit of motivation that you have to try and do something with yourself. So, I think.
So, what's your stance on it? Do you want to keep it banned, or?
No, I think it should be decriminalized for just personal use in the home. But I'd still go after, street dealers and gangs and things like this, definitely.
But I guess like the issue is like the ability. Who has the right to sell it? If it has to be like a legalized sort of thing, like can you go to a shop? Like do weed shops exist? Like what would you say to that?
Yeah, I'd probably start with a little bit of, I don't know. As a top, I haven't really thought huge amounts beyond that point. I just think, like maybe, yeah, certainly I'm not advocating that we start selling like heroin and stuff like that, because I'd basically be for decriminalizing most drugs. But I also don't think, you should just be like able to sell heroin and stuff in a store or whatever. As long as you just pay your taxes on it or whatever. I think you just shouldn't. I just don't see the point. It's just a waste, I think, of taxpayers' money to have like people, rotting away in prison for sometimes life sentences. If it's, thanks to the Joe Biden's crime bill and stuff, where people have like 3 drug-related offenses or something, and they end up in prison for the rest of their life. Like, I just think I don't think that's an efficient use of taxpayers' money. You've got like someone that got caught smoking weed, or had weed on them, just a small amount in their possession, and suddenly they're going to prison for like a number of years. Is that really a good use of taxpayers' money? Like, cost thousands and thousands to imprison this person just because they were smoking weed? I just think that's ridiculous, in all honesty. So, but in terms of like, should it be available? I don't know. Like, I don't know. I guess, yeah, it should weed probably okay, like to sell, like regulated in shops, in the sense that you have, got to have some proof that you got it from, reasonable source. I think the issue would be like that people are still buying the drugs from, criminal organizations, because then you're empowering those organizations, by buying their drugs off them. I think you've got to show some proof that you made it like, in your own home or whatever.
Because I mean, this is what happened in Prohibition, wasn't it? Like, you had the people who were brewing moonshine in their back garden, and that's obviously quite bad. Like, I would rather have a nice bottle of I don't know, Jim Beam or something over the moonshine some dude made in his bathtub, and it's probably going to do your liver like quite a bit of a favor too. I don't know, man. It's a difficult one, because, like I said, I'm an economic conservative. I'm a free market conservative, and yeah, like I don't want people going to prison for the crime of purchasing something with money and then using it when they're completely informed about something. They're completely informed about the danger, and the only danger they're having is, okay, they're giving money to drug dealers. But I don't know. I mean, obviously we're a conservative channel. We're going to have quite a lot of people who say, well, no, this is it's actually immoral because we're introducing another poison onto the market, and there's no need to. And the thing with alcohol is there's a poison on the market, but that's just because, we've had 3,000 years when we haven't been regulating alcohol, right? So there's not much we can really do about that, and Prohibition proved it. So I don't know. It's a balancing act. For me, I lean towards my libertarian tendencies in this one.
I suppose that's the other interesting thing is if it's decriminalized, you might as well make use of that to try and regulate the actual drugs that are on the market. It gives you an opportunity then to regulate the kind of drugs that are on the market, because you can, maybe have some agency that like goes round to the weed shops every now and again and just make sure that like the weed's quite pure and it's not got, adverse chemicals and stuff in there as well. Because so I that's like one of the advantages, is you can kind of like take control a bit out of what kind of drugs are out there, as opposed to it. And obviously, like the worst one for that would be something like, just like pills in general. It's always impossible to tell what's like in a pill, but probably like with weed, it's more like the issue of that is things like fertilizers or whatever and stuff can cause issues. But yeah, I don't know. There's a whole. I suppose like for me, the whole thing is like, yeah, I'd support decriminalize it. I think my belief is that the right wing, in terms of like the politicians, as in the Republicans, are actually a little bit behind on the times on this. I think the general consensus is people don't really care. I think they're kind of sick of the whole war on drugs thing now, and they don't want to be spending. I think how many people are in prison now for drug-related instances, like the amount of money, billions and billions and billions of taxpayers' money probably being spent every single year to keep drug users locked up. It just seems like a waste to me. But
definitely, and especially like, I mean, I don't want to come across as snobby here, but American prisons seem to be bloody awful. I'm subscribed to someone on YouTube. I can't remember his name, but his name in real life is Larry Lawton, but I can't remember the name of his channel. And he basically, he was a con artist or something. He spent like 20 years in prison, and some of the stories he has, like American prisons, you can go into an American prison being a very small time criminal, and you've had like an offense and you need to do your time, whatever, but you're going to come out a career criminal, because some of the things that go on there, I always thought the kind of Hollywood like image of prisons was like really over exaggerated, and you had things like Prison Break, and you had like gangs of people who would just like assault and rape people. But it's kind of true. Like it's all rooted in reality. And so yeah, like when we talk about weed, is it right to be said someone has a joint on them? And listen, like I find most people who smoke weed to be kind of obnoxious, because it's like a culture grows up around it, doesn't it? But they don't really deserve to go to prison. And if you've got some weedy skater dude or something, gets put in prison, and then he comes out a fully fledged up member of the Aryan Brotherhood or something, that's quite a fair. That's quite that's not good, is it? That's quite a poor chain of defense.
Yeah, I think you make a good point there. Is a lot of people could end up in prison that really don't know the first thing about street smarts, and they're kind of forced to in prison, and like you say, they come out kind of a hardened person who maybe is then actually more likely to go on and commit different types of crime as well. And I think ultimately, the end goal obviously is we want a society free of not even necessarily crime, but just like, because some things, not everyone agrees that certain things should or shouldn't be illegal, but just ultimately a society where people do no harm as much as possible to each other. We obviously don't want people going around and stealing from one another or stealing from shops or whatever and that kind of stuff. And all of these other things ultimately boil down to, I don't know. I honestly think like drugs are just at the heart of so many society's issues. The way we deal with it now has been basically a failure, I think, in many ways. So I think we've got to try something new. And this might be one of the ways that we can do it.
Well, I think a quite interesting. So anyone watching, I'm a history nerd, and it's quite interesting when you compare the response of these kind of Western societies to the opium wars in the 19th century. And so we just basically flooded China with heroin and profited greatly off it. Okay, but I mean, they tried very, very hard to stop it getting into a country, but you can't stop drugs getting into a country. You can't have a policeman on every section of border, okay?
Yeah.
Kind of, you can build a wall there, but people will still find ways around it. So drugs will like kind of come into your country. And it completely destroyed China. It completely like ruined generations of people, and it completely annihilated them. Okay, like in their mental capacity. I'm not saying weed has that effect, but certainly if you look at the amount of drugs that have poured into the West since the 60s, 70s, 80s, I mean, it really has destroyed people's lives and their families' lives too, hasn't it? So I guess if you look at it that way, from a civilizational perspective, it is immoral to decriminalize the very thing that is destroying a society. But if you're sort of powerless in the face of it, is it better to kind of grapple with it and get on board with it? I don't know.
Well, I guess no one's saying, I don't like, the thing is, when we're talking about criminalizing drug use, let's actually have a look at the effects of that. The effects are, one, doesn't actually do a great deal to the amount of drug use anyway. But then secondly, you also end up with a load of people in prison. And all of the effects that come with that, obviously, people's lives, it's pretty difficult if you're a drug user to turn your life around and really start making something of your life and being productive with your life and being motivated. It's then another hurdle that you've got to cross if you've then also just been to prison for, say, 6 months or a year or whatever, and now you've got a criminal record. So I just I think the whole war on drugs thing has failed. And it's not to say that I'm not someone who's like believes in having good police and being tough on crime and that kind of thing, because I absolutely do. Like, I think it's really important that there are lots of police on the streets, and having that kind of constant presence, so people feel safe and protected in their communities, right? Businesses and feel good, that they're not going to be like robbed at the first opportunity, and that people feel comfortable going out and actually being mobile in the economy and going to places and going to bars and having a drink and not worrying about going back late at night at home or whatever, or having to be concerned about those things, or all of these other factors. Like, if people feel safe in their communities, then they're going to be more likely to go out and do things. Parents are going to let their children go down to the local areas or whatever, right, and actually go and do things with their friends or whatever. So it's like, it's in everyone's interest that the communities feel safe, and the only way you can really do that is if you have like a good police force and good police presence. So I am like someone that believes in being tough on crime and stuff. It's just the kind of the cure for dealing with drug problems in America has been worse than the actual issue it was in the first place. That's what it feels like now at this point.
Yeah, I'm tempted to agree with you.
But yeah,
can you just check your Discord messages, by the way?
Yeah,
if you have time. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's a very tricky issue, isn't it? Because you do run the risk of, if you do legalize this thing, just absolutely flooding a nation with this thing that's basically disabling people. But
it's not an easy decision, is it? Certainly, I think we just need to try different things, and then almost like a trial run, really. Start with something like weed, see how that goes, then try a different drug, see how that goes. If the effect is proving like as a positive one, then go ahead with it. The problem with, I guess the real issue is that it at a federal level, they've just been so stagnant in trying to do things differently when it comes to drug crime. So without even trying other ideas, the issues are never going to be fixed, are they? Because there's no doubt right now that the solution is not what's happening right now, because it's had a long trial run, hasn't it? So I think, you know, I think this is a good step, and if it, obviously it's not going to be legalized anyway, but most states are basically legalizing it now anyway. I think it says in this article, and I can't remember exactly how many it is. Yeah, 38 states allow medical marijuana, and in 15 it's legal. So like 1/3 of states, and then, you know, 2/3 allow for medical purposes. But yeah, should we move on?
Right. Yeah, if I seem distracted during that, it's because I'm trying to post a stream on Parler.
Yeah.
Or we've had this recently. I've not been able to post any videos on Parler. Like, I don't know if we're shadow banned or anything, because they might think we just you can't get a shadow banned on Parler. That's an achievement, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it might just be my phone or something. But yeah, I'm having a bit of a.
A bit of a what's it? A boomer. Bit of a boomer.
A bit of a boomer moment. I'm trying to. How do you use this Parler thing?
While you do that, I'm going to read a little bit of this from the Daily Mail. So, obviously, the whole Me Too movement kind of feel like that started maybe like 2 years ago, 3 years ago at this point. I can't remember exactly when it was. And then obviously you had all these various different, you know, organizations and whatnot that started, I suppose, to try and look into the city. I mean, I don't know. It basically just virtue signal, isn't it? Like, oh, I'm part of this organization, this group, so therefore, you know, don't come after me or whatever.
Do you think so?
Well, I just think for many people, I think for me, like, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to go too much onto it without actually reading it, but like in Hollywood, you know, we've seen obviously the stuff like with Harvey Weinstein or whatever and all that, and no one's like going to be like, oh yeah, that was okay. Like, obviously it's not, and I don't think anyone was surprised really in many ways. Like, when you have like this ultra competitive industry of acting, you know, when you give people then that power to, you know, decide who makes it and who doesn't, then, you know, people are just very corruptible, aren't they? So they're going to take advantage of that. And, you know, Harvey Weinstein's a bad man, and there's no doubt about that. But so many people would have known about it, and it was kept quiet for such a long period of time. And so what, all's forgiven now? And it's like, this is the thing that I just hate about people in Hollywood. They're just so patronizing and condescending, and it's almost like, you know, their industry, their whole thing is corrupt to the core. Everyone can see that, and then no one, it's like basically a couple of people get scapegoated, and then, you know, everyone just gets to carry on being, you know, a super successful multi-millionaire making films and whatnot. And it's like, oh yeah, just sweep that all under the rug. Yeah,
they make a nice tweet about criticizing the very thing they profited from for all those years. And then, you know, all is forgiven. Don't worry about it, guys. You know, we criticize the white man. So
yeah, I support the Me Too movement and blah 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 and all this. And then suddenly it's like no, it doesn't. It's about individuals. You know, it's about individuals being accountable. If someone is doing something bad, then you, like Harvey Weinstein was, then you do something about it. You have a moral duty, if you know about it, to call it out. But so many people didn't, because they were profiting from the status quo as it was. So
well, I'll just give my very quick opinion on Me Too before we go into the article, because I mean, because I worked in the European Parliament when Me Too was just becoming a thing and everything, right? And I think it's quite important because, you know, it was absolutely right, because there are kind of people who were like, you know, in their mid-60s, like Joe Biden, and, you know, they'd like kind of they'd grown up in an environment where it was totally normal to do this thing. You know, they were working in the 70s where this was the norm. This was, you know, taken without question. So when you get to 2010, the 2010, sorry, is it right that women are in the workplace and they're having guys saying, yeah, suck my dick, or else you don't get a promotion? That's bad, okay? And that aspect of the Me Too movement, I do agree with. You know, probably that's quite a bad thing. Let's stamp that out. Let's bring attention to it. Let's shine a spotlight on it, and they did. But like you say, you get quite a lot of parasites with that because it becomes the woke progressive theme of the day, and suddenly it just becomes polarized because you get lots of radical feminists taking a rather pragmatic and quite a good campaign, and they subvert it. And suddenly, like Me Too, instead of just saying don't commit sexual harassment in the workplace, you get people trying to turn it into redistribution of wealth from males to females to address the glass ceiling, and the gender pay gap and things like that. So I think you see it with almost every movement, don't you? Like you anything happens, even with Black Lives Matter, probably don't have policemen killing black guys. Fine, nobody disagrees with that statement, but then it turns into defund the police, which we'll come into later.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, I'm going to read this story first, and then we'll touch more on that. So, Time's Up, the organisation set to fight sexual harassment in the workplace in the wake of the Me Too movement, spent the bulk of its donations on executive salaries and only a fraction on legal costs to help victims in the first year, records show. Tax filings show that the organisation, which was founded by Hollywood celebrities and is made up from the Time's Up Foundation and Time's Up Now Inc., raised $3.6 million in 2018 in its first year of operation. However, less than 10% was spent on helping those women who have experienced sexual harassment. Filings show $312,000 was spent on the legal defence fund, while $1.4 million was spent on salaries, and more than $157,000 was spent on conferences at luxury resorts, and a further $58,000 was spent on travel. The organisation brought in Hollywood's heavyweights during the early days of its operation, with Reese Witherspoon, Amy Schumer, and Brie Larson holding positions on its board. The tax filing detail the mission of Time's Up Now as being to promote safe, fair, and dignified work for women of all kinds. We work to make sure that women are free from harassment and other forms of discrimination on the job, have equal opportunity for economic security, and can achieve the highest positions of power wherever they work. So going back to what you were saying, there is absolutely no doubt about it. There are going to be, sick individuals, bad individuals who are taking advantage of their position of power that they have to, gain all sorts of like sexual favors or whatever and this kind of thing. And that's bad. And it's bad, not just because it's bad moralistically, but it ultimately means that, the best person isn't getting the job. Which is kind of like, the whole ethos of our society and capitalism and the meritocracy and this kind of thing. So it's just bad on that level anyway. Not just moralistically, like ethically, and then just in terms of like logically, it's not a good thing. We want the best people in the best jobs. So any form of like nepotism or blackmail or whatever and this kind of thing is bad. And there's no doubt there will have been obviously lots of women targeted by this. What you do then is that is already against the law, right? So it's not like, so the issues that we need, the changes that we need to make are not in terms of the law, because it's already against the law. It's not like we're talking about a civil rights movement or something, the law has already been corrected, and we're now at the point where that can't happen. What needs to be done is that when people see it, they need to call it out to bring these individuals to justice. That didn't happen with Harvey Weinstein. So what happened, as you said, instead, we got this Me Too movement, which was basically about empowering the women, but then in the opposite direction, right? To the same extent that the men were empowered. So before you had people like Harvey Weinstein being able to go about doing this thing and nobody called him out on it, and he was able to just continue doing it despite people knowing about it. And now we have kind of an opposite situation where, innocent men are often having their careers ruined through accusations, because we've gone to the opposite end of the scale. Whereas before it was, we didn't believe the women regardless. Now it's, we do believe them regardless. And why can't we just have, what should be a relatively uncontroversial stance on the matter is just believe in the justice system and go, okay, if somebody has done something wrong, and then they go to court. And that's why organizations like this could be good, because they raise money to help people with their lawsuits. And if enough people are empowered enough to have the money to be able to bring people to trial, rich individuals, and beat them when they've done something wrong, then the problem goes away, because now people aren't so, brazen in what they're doing, because they're going to be caught out and they're going to be, justice will prevail. That's the whole point, right? It's already against the law. Make sure the law's applied to those people. That's all you have to do to solve the issue. And so you have this organization that's meant to do that, and instead they've just pissed up all the money.
Yeah. And the thing is, you mentioned that that it's kind of the pendulum swung the opposite way, and now women are believed, the accusation is believed without any kind of, questioning about it. And it just shows the kind of stupidity of the average lefty, doesn't it? Because that slogan, believe all women, it's because women were going to the police and the police were like, doubting it and saying like, oh, like, are you sure you weren't wearing like something, a little bit of skirt? Are you sure you weren't really looking for it and stuff like that? So that phrase originated because women were speaking out and they weren't being believed. So, it's objectively a good cause to stop that sort of thing. But then you got these kind of like thick lefties, and the worst thing is some of them might not even be thick. Some of them might actually be smart and using this to their advantage, and they subvert that. And we have the situation now where people take it at face value, believe all women, and suddenly the power of the accusation can damage you irrevocably. Look at the Johnny Depp case. Have you been following the Johnny Depp case, Ian?
Yeah, I know basically the summary of the situation, but I don't know the details.
Yeah, so there's two competing claims of domestic abuse, okay? Who do you think has been touted more in the mainstream media?
Well, from my understanding, yeah, but as you can say, from my understanding, the average person seems to believe Johnny Depp, but the courts have ruled against him, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's partially because of this. I mean, if you're a judge, you can't help but, be influenced by the public opinion. It's the entire reason we're not allowed to post things on social media about ongoing court cases, right? Because the hubbub about it can influence judges. Well, when you're in an environment where literally everyone in the country is going on a witch hunt for any kind of evidence of, I don't know, your eyes rest in the wrong section of the for a few seconds longer than they should, and suddenly you're fired, suddenly, Jim. But I don't like the gendered aspect of it really, because when we're talking about impunity, and especially in show business, it's not just women who suffer this. Lots of males suffer this too. But what is the kind of cultural stigma behind women demanding sexual favors from men in the workplace? You're kind of encouraged as a guy to high five each other and say like, hell yeah, buddy, like I got a promotion and sex, really. But the reality of the situation is like it's a completely hidden menace. That, and we had the comedian in the UK, Jimmy Savile, who was one of the worst paedophiles in world history. Something like, can you remember the number of people he abused? It's in the hundreds, wasn't it?
Yeah, like over a period of 50 years or something, right? Something crazy like that.
Exactly. It was absolute disgusting amount of people, like boys and girls, everyone. This is exactly the same thing, because it's the impunity of a celebrity, and they're using it to force themselves on people. So boys, girls, children. We should be targeting that impunity, and we should be stopping the kind of mechanisms that allow these people to abuse without any kind of accountability. But then you get these kind of like people, and they turn it into a women's rights issue. Like, yeah, it affects women a lot, but it doesn't affect women exclusively. So I don't see why everything has to be gendered when there's a much larger issue that could be addressed. We could address everything at once. We could target all of these things at once, but we don't choose to. We choose to focus just on women, and then in 20 years' time, we're going to have, oh, look, lots of men are being sexually abused in the workplace. Who knew? We could have stamped it out before it happened.
It reminds me of, as well as these organizations, these big institutions, shall we say. So you see it now, obviously, in the NFL or whatever, and this kind of all the virtuous signaling that they do, and obviously you see it in Hollywood, especially with the Me Too movement and this kind of thing. And it seems that the ones that seem to be protesting against this kind of behavior the most are the ones that tend to be most guilty of it once the truth comes out. And what really just kind of frustrates me more than anything is that people just fall for it, hook, line, and sinker. They'll be like, oh, the NFL's great now, because they support Black Lives Matter and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, yeah, but that, these guys are some of the worst perpetrators of the things that you're complaining about. Like, no one is saying that, racism is okay, or that, sexism is okay, or whatever. Basically, everyone disagrees with it, and like I said, you don't even have to disagree with it on a moralistic level. You can disagree with it on a level of like capitalism and having a meritocracy, because you don't want to cut out 50% of the workplace and disadvantage them, because you're ultimately at the top end, you're just going to have worse people in the jobs, because half the competition has been removed because of sexism.
Yeah. We get a double whammy from this, don't we? In fact, let's talk about the straight white male in this, because not only do we get the blame for the actions of the males from like these guys at the top, we also don't get those jobs, because the people who are getting those jobs are the ones putting dicks in their mouth for it. Let's talk about the poor situation of the straight white male.
Well, the thing is that this is why so many obviously white men now feel basically like they've become the scapegoat for all the world's problems, is because there's this narrative has been built that if you're male and white, that you're somehow now just automatically advantaged in life, and that means that you're automatically successful and have all of these luxuries. Well, the reality is actually no. Most people, a lot of people are born into hardship and struggle to escape. And that's the biggest factor, isn't it? Really, I think every sensible person can see that. If you're a poor black person, let me put it this way: if you're a poor white person, you're much more likely to do worse in life than a rich black person is, right? Because the economic status, social status is the more defining factor there in your success. So when we talk about equal opportunity, it doesn't exist. That's right. We don't have a society of equal opportunity. There are so many factors that impact it. And we should be moving and trying to build a society of equal opportunity, a meritocracy. That's the ultimate goal. I think everyone should agree upon that. Everyone does agree upon that, even if they, act differently or think there's different ways to achieve that. That's ultimately the goal that everyone wants. But the issue is that in reality, all of these other factors affect people's success more. So what you ultimately could have is a white person born into poverty, not really achieving much, struggling to achieve, even if they maybe are working hard and they've got good head on their shoulders, and they're still struggling. And then on top of that, they're basically being told that they're privileged and, they need to repay back to society, and they should let others benefit before themselves and all this kind of thing. And they think how much do you want the odds to be stacked against me? So of course they feel victimized and, and ironically oppressed because of the situation.
And then it comes to, election day, and, great surprise, straight white males more likely to be conservative than everyone else. Like shock horror. Of course we are, because the only people who choose to go along with that narrative are these absolute cook soy boys who they're like, oh, damn it. I have a few of these friends, by the way. They wake up in the morning and they're like, damn it, I'm still white. Like, damn, I hate the fact that 200 years ago, one of my ancestors did
may
something.
Or may not have owned a slave. Like,
yeah. Do you know? Was it Dan Hanan who said this? So he wrote. Oh no, it's Jordan Peterson, wasn't it? So he basically says, like, look, in the Second World War, you would have been a Nazi. Like, if you were a German in the Second World War, almost everyone would have been a Nazi, because that's just the societal kind of trend, and everyone likes to think, like, with today's kind of social standards looking back, we acknowledge the Nazis as evil, but actually what progressives do is they're just following the status quo, right? So in the Second World War, they would have been the Nazis. So why should we be held accountable for their actions? Because they're just products of their time, right? Yeah. And we evolve as societies, but we can look back and say that was evil, but we can't look back and say necessarily that the people who voted for the Nazis were evil. Some of them were, but not all of them were. And it's the same here. They want to attribute blame to people like us for, I don't know, colonial atrocities of 200 years ago or whatever. But the fact is, we bear no responsibility for it at all. And we don't benefit from it, and we don't gain from it. But they still want to act as if we do.
Yeah, the only thing we gain, like, the privilege we have is being born in a first world country. Mm-hmm. Having access to clean water and electricity, and relatively easy for us to go and get, just as it is everyone else, actually. Mm-hmm. Go and get university education if we want, if we so choose. Like the loans are freely available to us and whatnot. Basically, anyone can do it. Those are the actual privileges that we have. And in this world, though the economic, the nepotism and the economic factors play a bigger part than anything else. Mm-hmm. So not only anyway does it not really make sense. In the sense that to say that, white people are advantaged because of this or that. I mean, I suppose some will be. There will be some people out there who achieve something because they were going for a job, and the other person was a black person, and the person that was hiring them, was prejudiced towards the white person. Like, obviously that still happens, right? There's no doubt about that. You just got to try and. It's about the individuals. You got to get the individuals when you see it happening, and you do something about it, and you speak out about it. You got a moral duty to do it. Mm-hmm. That's how we fight racism, sexism, and all those kind of things. Is we speak out when we see it. We don't try and stack the odds in the other direction to try and negate it when you can't even come up with some kind of like quantitative level, of how much racism impacts someone's life. So how do you even know what you're supposed to do to counteract it? It just doesn't make any sense. You have the law exists. You can't be prejudiced towards someone in the workplace. You can't be sexist towards someone in the workplace or whatever. Racist or sexist, I should say. So if you see it, you call it out. You've got a moral duty to do it. That's what the awareness should be, is, try and stamp out that kind of thing in your own workplace. Try and stamp out that kind of thing in your own community. Build the kind of peer pressure that forces people to change their ways. Otherwise, they'll be ostracized from your community, or make people know in your workplace that kind of behavior won't be tolerated. Not try and build this sort of like, the thing is, I don't believe that they genuinely believe. I think they're using it as an excuse to distribute wealth. That's all it is. Ultimately, it seems to boil down to, we'll use this as an excuse to try and redistribute wealth, because they don't talk about equality anymore. They talk about equity now, about making everything even, and everyone with an ounce of common sense when it comes to, economic systems knows that if you try and force a redistribution of the wealth so everyone has the same amount, then it's just going to be disastrous and for your whole society. Obviously, we've ran the experiment many times, so we know the answers.
What do you think of these? Because I've heard some of these arguments that so to give you a bit of context, I wrote an article about Black Lives Matter in a local newspaper. I said they shouldn't smash it up and take down statues, basically. Okay, I was called a racist for this. That's fine. And so the argument a lot of people made. So I had like, close friends and colleagues messaging me like, "Oh, Connor, you're a racist," this sort of thing. And I said, "Why?" And they said, "Well, because you wrote this article." And I explained how it wasn't racist. And then they moved the goalpost. Okay, so they said, and this is the argument I'm asking you about. So they said that actually all white people are born racist. We are all inherently racist because we are products of racist societies. Therefore, it is our job and our obligation to kind of purge ourselves and to go a bit further to account for this sin that we've committed, right? So what do you think of that? Because it's almost, I mean, it's a parallel to the original sin of Christianity, isn't it? That everybody is born evil and that we must all atone for our sins. Well, listen, Jesus can tell me like that I've sinned, okay? God can tell me that I've sinned. I don't have a problem with that. But I don't know, some fucking lefty who's never met me with a pink mohawk and I can't work out what gender they are, cannot tell me that I sinned and that I'm an evil person and cannot order me to self-flagellate in the street, right? Like, what do you think?
Well, I think the issue there, and ultimately this is what it always comes back to, and apparently the point that's completely lost on them when these type of people that come in this kind of argument is what they're basically saying is that you should be treated differently because of the color of your skin. It's not actually a hard concept to like. You see this all the time, like in college campuses and whatever, and they're like, like black. They'll have like black only sections of the library and stuff. This isn't. It wasn't satire. I double checked to make sure it wasn't satire. I saw this. There's a library in some college, university, or whatever in America where it's like a black only section. Like only black people are allowed to go and read in that area, and like they're so like blinded by just this ideology that they decided to kind of devote themselves to, that they can't look at that with fresh eyes and go, hold on, that seems a little bit like segregation and racism, and we're basically saying we're exclude. I mean, I think the point was to exclude white people from going into that area rather than segregating the black people away, which because this is the absolute irony of it, is this is coming from so-called anti-racists making a black only area in the library to segregate the white people from them.
And what was meant to be happening, like are white people, just so disruptive to black learning that you can't put them in the same room?
I guess so. I guess that's what it is, yeah.
I hate this infantilization of minorities on the left, like, they're not getting good marks on average. On average, black students get lower marks than white students. This must be racism. What must be happening is that white people must be disrupting their learning, like what?
Yeah,
I don't know.
So I don't know. The issue is like how far we've come with so many things, and I said this. We were talking about this. I can't remember what it was we were talking about, but I was saying how in places like California, I'm really happy that it seems that even in a place like that where people are going to be surrounded by liberals, that they're still kind of, and they're probably sat, watching and consuming mostly liberal media, that they're still able, their common sense kicks in and they go, hold on, this just doesn't seem right. I do believe that that's ultimately what will happen. We'll get so far down the rabbit hole and we'll be like, hold on, this is just ridiculous. Like, I don't know how we've got here, but we've now started segregating white people from black people inside schools and colleges. That's obviously ridiculous. I just can't believe that it has so much traction, this movement, and that people give it so much attention. And every day I read more of these ridiculous articles, basically just brainwashing, as far as I can see, in people into just hating an entire race of people. And I just sat there and I read it, and I just think, how have we just? I can't believe that we've got this far down here. I can't believe that no one's calling this out. Everyone can see it for their own eyes how stupid and ridiculous it is, but you're just not allowed to say anything against it. And the people in the media, they're not stupid people. They're actually not stupid people. They are smart people, many of them, that believe this kind of thing and hold these positions of power in the various media institutions, like professors and whatnot. Like, they've dedicated their lives to some academia, and that takes some level of brains. So they're not stupid. I have no idea how they've got so indoctrinated. I guess it's just, you talk about the Nazis and stuff. That's just basically what happened. They were just completely indoctrinated by it and like, oh yeah, no, it seems like basically the right thing to do. They've convinced themselves that it is. I think that's what we're seeing now. They've convinced themselves that this obviously absurd thing is okay, even though on face value it's obviously incredibly racist.
Yeah, I've got a kind of just to close the segment off. I've got a funny here for you just to illustrate all you've just said. And if you check your Discord, I just sent you a link. So what it is, this is an article from the BBC, that bastion of wokeness, and in it, they lavish praise upon a Black Panther and tell the life story of him as if he's a hero, of a dude who hijacked a jet, held 72 people hostage for $1 million, then fled justice to Algeria and started a new life. Okay, and they paint him as a hero, guy. He's a criminal. he's an armed hijacker.
Yeah.
Like, and somebody has sat there and looked at this and thought, what an inspirational, how stunning and brave this is. And listen, we're not going to read the article. It's a long one, right?
Yeah, but I was going to say, I was hoping for...
Like, look at this. He's been treated like a war hero, Like, how stunning and brave. And the cognitive dissonance you have to create to hold this person up as some form of hero on account of his skin color and because he's a member of the Black Panthers. Like, what the hell? Like you say, it's a lot to do in this like woke media. It's utterly ridiculous.
I thought you'd pick this out specifically, like, and gone. This is actually just 20 hours. This has just happened to be the latest one that you saw. Like, yeah. I was like, oh, this was pulled this up from that. He's brought this out as the epitome of what we're talking about. No, this is just an article from less than a day ago that it just happened to be written. And there's many more like this that come out every single day. Yeah, so that's a funny way anyway to conclude that topic. So I guess let's take a quick break anyway now.
Yeah,
just for 5 minutes.
I need a coffee in a week.
Yeah, and then when we come back, we have Minneapolis crime numbers, and we can talk about defund the police, which will be interesting. So, yeah.
Thanks for tuning in for the 6 people who are watching us now, which is about double what we were on last week, right?
We're growing.
So big welcome to you guys. Don't be afraid to say hello in the chat. Last week, everybody showed up in the last 10 minutes.
Yeah.
That was a bit annoying, but do feel free to send us a message, say hello, or leave a comment if you're watching this afterwards. Tell us what we can do better. Tell us if you want to see a bit of more of a variance in the topics or whatever. And we're going to go for a break, okay?
Yeah. So be right back. 5 minutes or so.
Hello, and we are back, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you didn't miss us too much. And we were just chatting there, actually. We got some breaking news that Rudy Giuliani has coronavirus. So get well soon to Rudy, wouldn't you say, Ian?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, absolutely. He's
And
all right, and his team are okay.
yeah, absolutely. And man his age, you got to look after yourself. So get well soon, Rudy, because you're going to play an important part in the election fraud to come. And speaking of playing important parts, the most important person is you. Do you see how smooth I was there?
Yeah.
So please do subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. Drop us a like if you're liking it. Say hello in the chat or in the comments, because we like that sort of interaction. So we've got another article here for you, because we're going to head on over to Defund the Police. One of our favourites. We had some of our best videos were on Defund the Police, weren't they?
Yeah, definitely. There's people still click on them quite often, actually. They do quite well still.
Yeah,
especially
it's one of the
Minneapolis.
issues. Yeah, it's one of the issues that unites the conservative community, getting behind the police, as you might well expect. So staggering surge in violent carjackings continues across Minneapolis. Such attacks up 537% compared with last November, worrying residents. This is in COVID times, by the way. So I don't understand how you can go up 500% and go with whatever. A housekeeper arriving early to her shift in South Minneapolis was confronted by two hooded teenagers outside her driver's side window. One pointed a gun at her head, demanding she get out before firing 3 shots. 2 ricocheted off the window and the third struck her side view mirror. The woman threw her car into reverse, sending the teens fleeing in the stolen car they arrived in. Latest in a series of brazen attempted armed robberies and carjackings in a wave that is stretching across the city. Minneapolis residents are grappling with triple-digit percentage increase in these crimes, and incidents occurring at all hours, including broad daylight. That's the worst thing, isn't it? The fact that it's happening in broad daylight says these criminals know they can get away with it. She is completely traumatized, the woman's employer, Kathy Higgins, said of the November 27th incident. It's just so bold. Over the last 2 months, Minneapolis police have logged more than 125 carjackings in the city, a troubling surge that authorities have largely linked to small groups of marauding teens, but an increasing number of adults have been arrested in recent weeks for the same crime. Within a 1-hour period, Saturday morning, police reported 3 separate carjackings in southeast Minneapolis, including one where an elderly woman was struck in the head. Such attacks were up 537% this month. So we're not going to go through the whole article, but I think that kind of gets the nuance of it, doesn't it, Ian? And it's almost as if you take away all the police's funding, you take away all the police officers, this is going to happen.
Yeah, and it's not even so much the funding at this point, because I don't know how much they have actually removed from their budget in Minneapolis. I think it's not even that much right now. I think it's only I'm sure it was maybe 5% or something. I can't remember, but they did vote to basically start defunding the police, and then I think they've now since gone back against it, and obviously the council is kind of divided over the issue now. But what happens is, the police have basically been neutered, really, in a sense. Police are going to be afraid now to get into any kind of confrontation whatsoever, because even if they do their job to the book, there's still a chance that they'll lose their job, and that big mobs of people might start coming around to their homes, and so police are less likely to get into confrontations. There's been some defunding to the police, and also criminals probably feel emboldened, feel like their confidence is up, because they can feel like they can do what they want now, and no one's going to be able to do anything about it, because the police have become an enemy of the people. Yeah. So
it's like a scene from the Joker or Batman or something, isn't it? Like the left has turned the public against the police in favor of the criminals.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone's actually seen the Joker with trying to think of his name, Joaquin Phoenix. Yeah, basically that I watched that film after the whole Black Lives Matter. I think it's been out for maybe a year or something like that. I can't remember, but after the most recent Black Lives Matter protests, riots, and I was staggered really behind the similarities in that film and what's happening in real life, you know, and Bruce Wayne is seen as like, oh, not Bruce Wayne, his father in the film, I guess. I forgot his father's name, but obviously they're like this rich family, and they're, you know, his father is running, isn't he, for mayor or something? I can't remember, and he's trying to clear up the streets and clear up the crime in the streets. And the Joker is kind of put up a little bit as kind of like the hero in many ways in the film, like, you know, this movement against these rich elites and whatnot who are trying to, you know, clear up the streets or whatever. And, or not clear up the streets, I should say, or whatever. So it's like they've kind of turned him into a hero. And then at the end, you have all these riots on the streets and they're sort of like pulling him along like he's their hero, really, in many ways. It kind of reminded me very much of the Black Lives Matter protests and stuff like this. When it comes to crime, it's like it is very much a psychological battle. And that's kind of what I was saying before, is if you have lots of police on the streets, just making their presence felt, you know, they're not, you know, like, people are still free, they still have liberty, and they're still able to go about their daily lives, but the police are just there as a presence. You know, they're not even necessarily interacting with people that much. They just are there as a presence. That plays a big part psychologically in the behavior of criminals and how, as you say, brazen they are, how brazen they are in going about what it is they want to do, in this case, carjacking now. So it really is no surprise. You'll see a similar trend until the sort of local governments start to stand behind the police departments again. Until that happens, you're probably going to see this trend continuing, I think.
Yeah, I mean, there is a certain thing to be said for the authority that comes with the uniform, right? And like, I'm not sure about you guys, but whenever I see a police person in the street, I kind of feel respect. I kind of feel a little bit afraid, kind of like I don't want to, like, you know, like I feel like I don't want to break the law. I feel like I should be on my best behavior around the police, right? But then also I know, like, you know, I'm reassured by their presence. I know nobody else is going to break the law here. But that illusion has been shattered. That psychological effect has been shattered in America. And so, you know, people see a police uniform now, and because of the hatred that's been dripped into their minds by this radical left, they look at the police officer and they feel hate. And, you know, this has been a cultural thing for many years. Like, do you remember the song "Fuck the Police"? Right. Listen, I don't want to be one of those people. Like I like the song, but like I will be all those people who's like, oh well, I disagree with it politically, so therefore I won't listen to it. But it is going to have an effect, isn't it, when you're telling people to fuck the police? And that's been repeated for many, many, many years in America, and it's having an effect. And when the Black Lives Matter did, they just exploded this wave of sentiment. And now, I mean, we looked at this in the videos, didn't we? You have scenarios where policemen are intervening in a routine thing, you know, a domestic argument or something, and then people are charging at them with knives because they know that the police officer has to make a split decision. If he shoots them, his career's down the drain, and you know, you're going to get people on the internet cancelling him and calling him a bastard and stuff by virtue of him being a police officer, or he gets knifed.
Yeah,
they've muted the police, as you said.
Yeah, I saw, actually, I think there's again another event like this. Protests have started again in Oregon, I think, over, I don't know all the details, so I don't want to pass judgment on it and say, oh, the police was in the right or the wrong or whatever on this one. But from what I hear, the description of it is the guy was armed with a knife and he was charging at the police officer, and then he shot him, which we see a lot. We see it quite often. Very, you know, interesting, because it kind of like goes back into what we're talking about with drugs and this kind of thing. Is a lot of the time it's people that are like high on various different things, and that's what causes that erraticness in their behavior. And then I think combined, like as we've spoken about, a kind of cultural phenomenon, I think, in some of these communities where it's, you know, like you say, glorifying violence and things like the NWA song "Fuck the Police" or whatever, and this kind of thing. And I don't, I sound like such a boomer, like blaming music and video games for violence or whatever, but I think there is obviously that hostility towards the police. You combine that then with like people on drugs or whatever and all that kind of thing, and then it makes sense a little bit why they do these absolutely ludicrous things like, you know, chase after a police officer with a knife and things like this. So really people need to be talking about, and obviously many people have already said this, it's not you know, a new idea, but people need to be talking about the culture in these communities and saying, well, perhaps they need to, you know, deal with other issues rather than blaming the police all the time for everything. Because if someone gets killed by the police, like, it's not a good situation. Obviously you don't want people being shot by the police, but it almost feels like the police are hamstrung. They have no other choice but to shoot people because of the confrontations that they end up in when they're going into some of these communities. So it's like people have to talk about some of the other issues and how to fix them, because this isn't going to work. We know it isn't going to work. If you just reduce confidence in the police and nuke the police's ability to actually go out and do things, then you just see these big spikes in crime. And no, there are no winners. There are no winners in this scenario.
No winners, only losers. And you know, it's a very sad indication of just how society has become, isn't it? And I'm quite scared, you know, that sentiment, because we actually, like, to give a European perspective, what we actually see is people copying the same sentiment in the United States, but without any of the nuance. So whereas in the United States, someone might genuinely be aggrieved with the police officers, okay, and I kind of understand that. The majority aren't, but whatever. But that sentiment is lost when it's translated over to Europe. And I hear Europeans now be like, oh, those racist police officers, right? But they're not. Like, and European police, in my experience, are generally great and generally quite effective. Pardon?
I think it depends on the country a little bit, but yeah.
Yeah, but in general, you know, at least compared to at least if you consider the reputations of the two. But that's the thing, all the nuance is lost, all the context is lost. And the same thing happens in the United States, okay? Because people are copy and pasting accusations that are applicable to individual police officers onto the entire police force, which is wrong. Almost every single police officer is a hero because they go out every day, they have a target on their backs, they go to serve their community, they go to help their community, and they go to protect their community. And that is their kind of drive and passion, okay? And they're hated for it. How sad that the left has poisoned people against it. And politicians like Ilhan Omar, like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, have enabled it. They've enabled it, and they've driven it, and they've used their platforms to boost it. And now, if we go back to the article, you have criminals operating in the streets doing carjackings, okay? And I think I said this 1,000 times before, who suffers most when criminals are brazenly emboldened? It's poorer communities, because there are more criminals in poorer communities. And who is more likely to be poor? Minorities, okay? So this absolutely, whatever they've done in Minneapolis, they've flip-flopped, they've sent so many messages to criminals that, you know, we're on your side now, and it is going to destroy the lives of police officers, it's going to destroy the lives of minorities, it's going to destroy the lives of pretty much everybody. This is not, there is not a single good thing to come out of this. Can you think of one?
No, there isn't. The only good thing that can come from it is lessons learned. That's the only thing that can come from it. But even then, I don't imagine that they'll be learned for very long at all. And that's just one thing as well that I want to add. Who is going to want to be a police officer now? And we've said this before, but who is going to want to be a police officer? Like, if putting on that uniform automatically makes you a racist in the eyes of many people, who's more likely to want to now join the police? People that already are okay with that title, right? So people that are racist,
Hmm.
so who are going in with a motive. If anything, this may make the police more racist than it was before. Yeah, however racist it was to begin with.
And yeah, 'cause it filters through to culture. And sorry to keep interrupting you, Ian, but I
Yeah.
saw something on Instagram today. Okay, so it was some progressive, and it had so the top of the picture was um, instead of giving compliments based on appearance, why not give compliments on the following? And it had like a list of things like I smash the patriarchy every day, that sort of thing, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that's really great about you. You can guess the type of things. But
Yeah.
one of them, and this made me realize just how weird the progressive have gotten. One of them was I hate all police officers unconditionally, and I'm proud of it. Um, let me sink that in there. For these people, that is an objectively good thing to hate all police officers everywhere without exception. Like you say, no one's going to want to be a police officer because people are sharing these things on social media. You're going through high school and all of your peers are sharing things like that. What a world we live in. What a future.
Exactly, which just makes you wonder, I think, in many ways, how could such an idiotic idea get to the forefront unless, you know, the goal, their so-called goal of reducing racism, can't actually be their goal, can it? It can't be their goal, because if it is, then enough people would have realized how ridiculously stupid defunding the police is, and the sentiment behind that is. You will not find one example anywhere after, in 5 years time from now, you will not find one example of a community, an area that went ahead and gave in to these demands, and now they're better for it. But the damage will already be done at that point. It's going to take a long, long time until I guess things start to look positive again for the relationship that the police have with the ordinary citizen and the public again, because it just seems like it's going to continue to nosedive now, and things will get worse and worse in these areas.
And in the meantime, so when have you ever been the victim of a crime? Because like if your car gets hijacked, okay,
Yeah.
for the rest of your life, you do not feel safe in a car. If your house gets burgled, you do not for the rest of your life feel safe, leaving your door unlocked. If you are assaulted in the street randomly, you do not for the rest of your life feel safe on the street. Okay, so if it takes 5 years to fix this damage, and that is a very kind of an positive assessment of it, like that's very ambitious, 5 years to fix this damage. That's 5 years of these crimes happening. How many people do you reckon that is who will never walk down the street again safe, or will never leave their house unlocked safe, or will always be feeling nervous and have sweaty hands on a car wheel?
This is it. I mean, I think I don't go too much on a tangent, but the psychological impact of being a victim of crime is often not talked about, maybe by people that obviously haven't experienced it. I mean, I remember as a young kid, like a few lads tried to basically just rob me in broad daylight. And they didn't get away with it. I got away, but I just remember, like, for maybe a couple of months after then, just as a young kid, I used to travel on my own often to school, on the bus and whatnot. And, I remember having like just moments where I'd start to be like getting like panicking a bit, like, oh, like what if I see him again or whatever, and this kind of thing. So I don't think people talk about the psychological impact of this. Like you say, all of these people, they're not just victims of a carjacking, they're psychological victims that are going to be suffering the effects of this for days afterwards. And it's the same for just about every single crime, like probably the worst one I can think of is is being attacked in your own home, really, in many ways. Like, 'cause if you don't even feel safe in your own home, then that's just such a awful situation to be in.
Or as is happening in Minneapolis in daylight, because if you're walking like there's a dark street at 2 a.m., you can kind of like separate that context in your head from walking down a busy high street, right? But if you're like doing the school run and you see crimes happening around you, that is when you never feel safe in your community again. And that is what the left has facilitated. It's broken people's communities, and it's going to break people's minds.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's move on to. There's just so much to talk about, isn't there, on it? And we could absolutely sit here and talk about it for days and days. I think just in general, as the channel progresses, and this is probably one of those things that we'll just come back to on many occasions. And sort of see what's happening in the progress, like in places like Minneapolis and all this kind of thing. Because whether we like it or not, an experiment is basically being run now, and it's being run on just ordinary people. They're now the guinea pigs now in places like Minneapolis, because these councils have kind of given in to their demands, to the demands of the mob, subverted democracy. Because they never had a mandate to do any of these things, democratically speaking. People didn't vote them in to defund the police. Because they've done that, then now find themselves the guinea pigs of this experiment, which is obviously ludicrous on the face of it. And everyone knows that it is, but you're not allowed to say it isn't. Otherwise, you'd be called a racist. I mean, it's just actually ridiculous. Really awful situation when you put it in that context. Just these people like that living in these cities, I feel so bad for them. I imagine many of them are already on their way out and leaving.
Yeah, and do you think the politicians enabling this, the Minneapolis City Council, do you think they suffer the effects of it in their gated communities and their nice lives, nice apartments, nice neighborhoods?
No, absolutely not.
It's the people who suffer.
It's just classic elitism, isn't it? That's that kind of mentality that made Trump so popular. Just elitists telling people how to live their lives while they live it a different way in their own protected environments. So, but yeah, speaking of Trump, he's been down to Georgia to kind of campaign for these two Senate races that happen in January. As I said, like in the intro, it's actually, these are more important. These are more important in many ways than the presidential election. If Joe Biden does become president, having all the branches, apart from the Supreme Court, but for how long, right? Having all the other branches of government run by Democrats, as Trump says, all of that good work that's been done, everything's at risk. Everything is at risk, at least with the Senate there as a bulwark against the crazies in the Democratic Party and the things that they want to do. We can sort of, lick our wounds a little bit over the next 2 years till the midterms and then 4 years into the next presidential election and recover. Because I do think that we're winning the war, culturally, the cultural war, I should say, over these issues. It's just, you're not going to win every battle along the way. And it's just a case of preventing them from doing as much damage as we can until sanity resumes within the public, which I don't know when that will happen. But I don't know. So I'll just read this anyway quickly and we can talk about it, because I just want to kind of present what it is, the things that Trump said, because I think it's important that people hear this, because I think some people don't know or aren't really appreciative of how important these races are. So President Trump is calling on Georgians to get out and vote red in order to keep the Senate majority for Republicans. At his rally in the state on Saturday, the president urged his supporters to vote for Republican candidates Senator Kelly Loeffler and Senator David Perdue. He said if they don't win, the socialists and communists will. Very simply, you will decide whether your children will grow up in a socialist country or whether they will grow up in a free country, President Trump stated. And I will tell you this, socialism is just the beginning for these people. These people want to go further than socialism into a communistic form of government. It's actually objectively true when you listen to the things they say. He noted that even if the left plans to steal this election, Republican voters still need to turn in droves to steer the vote in their favour. You must go and vote early, starting December 14th. They cheated and they rigged our presidential election, but we will still win it. They're going to try to rig this election too. These seats are the last line of defence to save America and protect all we have accomplished. You know, we've accomplished things that no other president has accomplished, and I did it with these two people. Proud citizens like you helped build this country, and together we're taking back our country. Our fight to drain the Washington swamp and reclaim America's destiny has just begun. We will not bend, and we will never back down. And these races are happening. Yeah, and these things are happening on January 5th. But obviously the early voting starts already. You can register to. You can go and request your ballot, your absentee ballot now if you're a Georgian. Yeah, because I'm sure many people are already doing so, and for their cats and dogs and relatives that may no longer be with us.
Well, there's a few, aren't there? I just had an idea whilst you're reading that. I'll just send you the link, because Trafalgar Group have actually, and listen, I know you, the listeners, you quite liked our polling videos. We've not done one for a while, so as a little stream reward, why don't we look at the polls a bit? So what you'll see in the polling is that, it's pretty much neck and neck in terms of Ossoff and Perdue. Ossoff just edging out Perdue. So we're perhaps losing the race there. But the real danger here, Raphael Warnock, who is, we've looked at him before, haven't we, Ian? He's a total nut job. He's total crazy. Kelly Loeffler, quite rightfully so, has developed a commanding lead over him. So we need both seats. We have to.
Yeah, I was going to say, just obviously, if the Democrats win both of these seats, it's effectively a tie, and it would go to the vice president. But yeah, both seats to really feel confident. Yeah, just feel confident in the majority, because you don't want to be relying on one vote, like every single person turning up to vote every single time. So yeah, the both seats, having both really makes a difference, I think.
Absolutely. But what's far more important is stopping Raphael Warnock, and it makes me really happy to see Kelly Loeffler taking the lead, because she seems like a very good, down-to-earth, conservative, centrist-minded individual. But this Warnock man, he's crazy. He wants to, white people to be like, hoarded down the streets saying sorry to everyone and this sort of thing. Utterly ludicrous. And I think what's really going to help these people is Donald Trump turning out in person in Georgia, leading from the front. I mean, look at Joe Biden. What's Joe Biden doing? What's Kamala Harris doing? They're not hitting the front pages, are they? They're not, delivering these powerful speeches. They're not mobilizing their supporters. They're too busy planning for a presidency that they haven't actually won yet. That's still completely up in the air. And I think this could translate through, isn't it? Because Biden is not a leader, certainly not as Trump is. Trump's rallying the troops, and he's driving in there for Georgia, and he's making damn well sure that if Joe Biden steals this election, that he's going to stop him getting his crazy agenda through in the Senate.
Yeah, I'm actually a little bit surprised by these numbers, in all honesty. But I think it says more about Raphael Warnock than anything else, because what you have to remember about Kelly Loeffler is she has never actually won an election before. She was put there. I forgot the name of the senator beforehand, but she was appointed in that position. She didn't win the election to get into that position. So she's kind of like untested in that regard. And she's had a couple of I don't know. I see kind of a split opinion on her among many conservatives. So I think this just says more about Raphael Warnock. People are looking at him and going, no, like you said quite rightly, this guy is a bit of a nut job. He's fully on the far left, the full sort of crazy part of the fringe far left, where they're talking about, you know, as you say, what was it? People that had to repent for being white, essentially, which is just astonishing, really, that this man is anywhere near any Senate ticket whatsoever. But this is obviously the situation that we find ourselves in. I mean, I would actually be fairly confident that, I mean, I feel like the Republicans are going to win both of these seats. I'm a little bit surprised by this data here, but I guess, you know, Purdue only marginally did not get the 50%. I'm kind of surprised to see kind of Ossoff make some gains, because that's what this poll basically indicates, that he's made some gains and he's taken the lead over Purdue. I don't know. I'm a little bit surprised by that. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is a bit of a, what do you call it, outlier. In that regard. I would like to see what more polling comes up. And now actually there's probably going to be more polling on this. Perhaps it's, as you say, time we did some more polling videos on the topic, which
I want to do another. I quite enjoyed them, you know. I want to see some traditional Ian Smith mathematical analysis.
Yeah, that's it. My polling videos are. Listen, I did say, okay, look, we both called the election wrong. So I mean, if you believe the actual results that we're told, but I did say that Arizona and Georgia, those are the two states that Trump should be worried about. If he does lose them, those are the two states that he should be worried about, you know, and obviously that has been the case. I think, you know, even with fraud taken into the equation, and, you know, obviously we'll see what happens now, because, I mean, we are running short on time for these lawsuits to come to fruition. But even with those things taken into account, I think it's clear that those states are closer than, like, North Carolina and Florida, which obviously, I mean, in Texas, people were talking about Texas and Iowa, which obviously anyone with who was paying any attention whatsoever, yeah, I could see the how ridiculous the polls were in places like Texas and Ohio, you know, calling it a close race and this kind of thing. You know, Trump's absolutely walked it in those states. Florida absolutely smashed it. North Carolina did really well. It was always Georgia and Arizona that were going to be the tough ones. So, you know, but I just would be like, for the Democrats to win in Georgia now from here in these Senate races, they have to make even more gains. And they've basically lost both of these Senate races. They just ended up going to a runoff because they didn't quite have the majority that they needed. Obviously in, obviously in the one with Kelly Loeffler, you had like multiple Republicans running at the same time, and the vote was like massively split among them. So that's why you ended up in this situation. But Purdue was like, it was so very, very close to getting to 50%. But yeah, I've gone off point now, haven't I?
You're excited to make a video on this, aren't you? I can hear it.
I want to make some poll videos, analysing the polls on the Georgia situation. But I just think, anyway, what I just wanted to highlight was how important what Trump says is absolutely true. We cannot allow a Democrat or the Democrats to control the three branches of government, well, the two branches of government in Congress and the presidency, and then, you know, obviously, since the Supreme Court isn't protected by the Constitution in terms of its size, they can just obviously stack that as well and control everything. And
do you remember during the election how elusive he was on that? He never actually committed to a position on stacking the court.
No.
These Democrats, it's the nightmare scenario if they do take the election, which I don't think they will. But if they do take the election and they do take all three theatres of government, all three branches of, if they do take the trifecta, let's just say, because my words have failed me tonight, they're going to destroy America, and they're going to destroy the free enterprise and the free capital and the freedom of thought that made that country great. They're going to destroy the institutions and mechanisms that allowed it to grow great. And for what? Because AOC and Elon Omar can dominate Joe Biden like a geriatric old man. It's sad.
Well,
sad full stop.
Forget about them, right? I mean, obviously don't forget about them, but Kamala Harris, who is the de facto president, because if Joe Biden has another fall, probably won't survive that one, right? She's the de facto president, and she regularly tweets about equity and talk, equity literally means redistribution of wealth so that everyone has an equal amount.
Mm-hmm.
That's beyond socialism. That's communism. That is communism. That's Marxism. Those are incredibly dangerous ideas and policies to have a sitting vice president talking about those things and tweeting about those things. When people say, oh no, look, what we're advocating, you call it socialism, but really it's just quite centrist, really, in Europe, as opposed to like Europe. And it's true, like in many ways, yeah, okay, a lot of Europe has like single payer national health service. Obviously we have one here in the UK and stuff like that. Not that everyone's happy with it, but
you come to Europe, I will show you socialism. I will show you huge grey tower blocks where you stand in a line for 4 hours to get your government ID, and then you get to the front of the queue and someone literally says, no, this is the wrong line, you have to go to another line. I hate this socialist hell. In Belgium, 55% tax rate if you earn more than €2,000 a month.
Yeah.
So if you earn just a little bit above minimum wage, 55% tax rate.
It's just ridiculous.
Sorry, interrupted you there.
Yeah, but what do you get from it? What do you actually get for it? Like, all of the public services you're always talking about are just ridiculous, and it's because obviously it's just run by bureaucrats who know absolutely nothing about how to spend money wisely, and they just waste it, and they've got so much of it, and they just piss it all down the drain. But like I was saying, you've got people like, Bernie Sanders and stuff, and they try to downplay in many ways, like how left-wing they are. And it's like, no, the ideas, the things that they talk about when they're talking about things like equity, these are Marxist ideas. They're not like, oh, we're just a bit, we're a little bit center-left and we just want a bit of like European type, welfare. No, that's not what they're talking about. They're talking about redistributing wealth. It's incredibly dangerous, the things that they talk about. Now, I do think that there's probably enough moderate Democrats to block that kind of thing. But, I mean, to block the more insane kind of things. But you just can't risk empowering them this much. Because, as you say, there is the risk of them actually just destroying many parts of America. And anyone... Well, not anyone, but many people can see that live outside America. Do not let the media fool you, okay? Many people in Europe look at America and see, the bastion of democracy and free speech and free enterprise, and just the country and a country of opportunity. And I know it's not the same as it has been in the past, and it's things have gotten worse in many ways, but still. What you have is something to be proud of, and you should be patriotic. You really should be, because what America is the greatest country in the world. It just actually is. That's just actually what it is. Just don't let it get destroyed, because we've got nothing else to look up to then at that point.
Yeah, and what's really telling is, It just seems like when you look in the history books and you look at like an ancient empire, right? And that empire, you thought it would never fall, but then just a few bad things happened. A plague arrives and affects society so much, and then an incompetent ruler takes the throne and passes really poor decisions, and suddenly, before you know it, like this empire that's so strong collapses apart. Excuse me, the same thing can happen, like, excuse me, sorry. I think I swallowed a fly there. So imagine 50 years from now, we're looking at a textbook and we're seeing, President Trump was denied the election in, amidst allegations of fraud. Okay, and then Joe Biden takes the vote, the throne, takes presidency. he sees a family dog, very dangerous creatures, as we know, very lethal creatures. He falls, he breaks his neck, and then, Comrade Harris takes the presidency, and then she passes all this huge progressive agenda. What's in her first day in power? She passes the Great Reparations Act and this sort of thing. And before you know it, America never chose Kamala Harris. America never chose socialism, but America has socialism. And that's the most dangerous thing. And really, the bulwark, as you say, the bulwark against this is patriotic ideas and a great respect for the freedom of enterprise, freedom of thought, freedom of information that so has created America great.
Yeah, and you're right in saying you cannot get complacent about things. And like you say, a few unfortunate events, a series of unfortunate events all coming one after the other can cause great countries, great civilizations, great societies to collapse like that. And when we're talking about collapse, what we mean by that is America not being the great economic power that it is and not being able to influence other nations around the world and help carry that geopolitical influence of representing, Western values and ideas. The ideas that we basically all think are the things that everyone else should be doing, having democracy and, freedom, free liberties and free enterprise and these kind of things. These ideas, freedom of religion, these ideas are the ones that we hold dear. We think that this is the way to do things. Well, the reality is, like, if you don't have the influence across the globe, then other ideas are the ones that start to,
take their place.
Yeah, take their place in these developing countries. So in places like Africa, do we want to see a developed Africa 50 years from now that's largely communist or one that's largely capitalist? So
or the Chinese hybrid model.
Yeah, or the Chinese hybrid model, but full of one-party dictatorships and all of this kind of thing. People's Republic of various different African nations or whatever. Like, that is potentially the future that we're looking at, and this now, the decisions that we make now and the people that we elect now have a massive impact on that future. And so you have to think about it that way. We can't have a situation 50 years from now where China is just so empowered that they exert this influence across the whole globe, and suddenly, we're on the back foot. It's trying to champion things like democracy and freedom of religion and free speech in a world of censorship and dictatorships. Like that's very real possibility.
Absolutely.
But yeah, anyway, so things are getting very dark, aren't they? Let's have a look at the last story that we've got from Tulsi Gabbard, our favourite Democrat, maybe. I don't know if she is or not. Maybe she is. I'm trying to think now. Yeah, probably. She has kind of backed Trump on Twitter, actually. So let's just kind of jump into this one quite quickly. I'll talk about what Trump tweeted. So Trump tweeted, Section 230, which is a liability shielding gift from the US to big tech, the only companies in America that have it, corporate welfare, is a serious threat to our national security and election integrity. Our country can never be safe and secure if we allow it to stand, Trump tweeted. Therefore, if the very dangerous and unfair Section 230 is not completely terminated as part of the National Defense Authorization Act, I will be forced to unequivocally veto the bill when sent to the very beautiful Resolute desk. Take back America now, thank you, Trump continued in the tweet. Gabbard then quoted Trump and said, I fully support you on this. Please don't back down. The freedom and future of our country is at stake. And Section 230 is kind of like an interesting one. I don't know if repealing it is the right way or what. I don't know. I think my only issue is, and I think basically everyone's issue is, when you look at the big tech now recently in this election, like Twitter and Facebook, Google, YouTube, obviously a subsidiary of Google. They've all acted in a very partisan way. They've clearly favoured one political party over the other, which I mean, you can say, okay, like they're okay to do that with as they're a private company or whether they can do what they want. The reality is they have so much money, they have so much power that they have influenced law and legislation to the point where they're now protected by the law from being sued. And things need to change because we cannot have a situation, and the Democrats might now think, oh, this is fine, right? But let's say in 4 years' time or 8 years' time, suddenly they're on the side of the Republicans, and you've got some, swamp creature in charge of who's managed to, get hold of the Republican ticket, and he's backed by Facebook and Twitter and Google and all this, and they're the ones that are kind of censoring, Democrat narratives and this kind of thing. They'll suddenly be, they'll understand what it feels like, and they'll be like, hold on, this isn't wrong, this isn't right. And it isn't right. You can't have these companies with this amount of power being able to have so much influence over the election.
Yeah, I mean, doesn't this kind of feel like a reckoning for Twitter and Facebook? Because things have reached a head, and I think nobody can really disagree that they need to kind of be reined in now, don't they? Because the fact is, they have a competitive advantage through Section 230, because you said that they can do what they want because they're a private company. Well, yes, they can do what they want within the law, but they're not respecting the law, are they? Because Section 230 gives them these privileges that they're not responsible for their content, because they are platform. Their platform, that the user still bears the original responsibility, but then they're not following the law. They're not following the intention of the law because they're still acting as curators and they're still picking and choosing what content appears. And I mean, even we, small YouTube channel that we are, suffered from suppression. Our coverage of the Hunter Biden story was hidden by. So this really is at all levels a massive censorship campaign run by Twitter, run by Facebook, and they get called into Senate and they don't know what to say. They shrug their shoulders because they think they have impunity. They really need to be stopped. And then you got platforms like Parler who absolutely cannot compete with them because they are subject to the rules, but they're not ginormous enough that they can tell senators to do one, like Mark Zuckerberg and Jack Dorsey can do.
Yeah.
So really, yeah, I think most people are on board now. We do need to get rid of Section 230, or at least replace it, or at least have some sort of mechanism for enforcing Facebook and Twitter to comply with it. Now, if that means keeping the law, but defining Facebook and Twitter differently, so people do realize they are content creators and therefore are liable for every single terrorist who makes an account on there, or every single white supremacist who makes an account on there, so be it. They're big enough companies. They can actually deal with that. They can deal with the consequences of their actions.
I think I still think we're going to be talking about the impact that big tech has on our societies for a long, long time, because the real solution to deal with it doesn't already exist in the law. It doesn't exist, and we're still sort of far behind on this. The kind of sway and power and influence and pull that these big companies have is unlike anything else that's ever existed. Like, think of the biggest newspaper that's ever existed, the most widely circulated paper that's ever existed in America, and it doesn't have as much sway and pull as, say, Facebook does. If they really wanted to take advantage of how many users they have and the kind of content and information that those users have and the kind of content and information that they censor. So we have this sort of weird situation where we've never really faced this before. It wasn't possible in the past that you had one individual or even a group of individuals that could sway public opinion so much. So there has to be some sort of special... 230 protects them from basically the natural way that you would go about dealing with a big company like Facebook or Google, from getting to the size that they are and allowing to have the influence that they are. Because by sort of allowing people to just challenge some of the ridiculous things that they say on there, like imagine one of us being able to just sue Twitter or Facebook every time some like mental lefty starts like, puts like, kill all white people or kill all police or something in a tweet or whatever. Like it wouldn't be that the market would do the work for us, because those kind of ridiculous ideas, calling and advocating violence or slandering or people online, would cause that company to have to filter out that stuff for us, essentially, or be impartial in it, because they wouldn't be able to just kind of favor one side and not have to worry about the repercussions. So I don't know. I just think, like you say, the law needs to actually be executed, and they need to be held liable for what they're doing. It's obvious that anyone can see. We even saw that study on Google where they
sorry.
Yeah, I don't know what he did there, but you even saw that study on Google where I forgot the name of the guy, but he was looking at, he had like field agents or whatever set all across the US, and they were recording their interactions with Google, and Google was like deliberately not telling Republicans to go out and vote. So they're already doing it. We already know that they're doing it, and we can prove it. So why isn't anything being done about it? It's because they're in bed, aren't they, with one of the main political parties. So as long as that situation, that marriage exists, they've got a big pull in Congress as well. And when we're talking about the swamp, this is exactly what we're talking about. Big giant corporations like Facebook, with their billions and billions and billions of dollars, getting preferential treatment over just an ordinary citizen who just goes about their daily life and tries to do their best and abide by the law. They are able to have more control than other people. It shouldn't be that way. But the swamp allows that. It allows people to have special interests. And it used to be that the left were against this kind of thing. Tulsi Gabbard is one of the few true left-wing people, like truly proper liberal people, who actually have sane ideas mostly sane ideas in Congress. Like, many of them are just either bought and paid for or insane.
Yeah, no, I agree totally. Yeah. Oh, sorry, my mind's gone blank. I think I'm quite tired, Ian. But I mean, I guess I agree with you. What do you think? Do you think that President Trump will be able to repeal 230 in the current legislative term? Because if we get to, and I don't think it will happen, but if we do get to a Biden presidency, then that's 4 years of unfettered, unrestricted Facebook and Twitter, right? So can we rush this through right now? Or what do you think would happen?
I don't see how it's going to happen. No, I mean, he's basically just trying to force them into doing it by obviously saying that it'll veto the National Defense Authorization Act. But, the reality is there's too many Democrats in the House that, that won't allow it to happen. So I don't think he will be able to repeal it, no. I don't even know if it necessarily needs to be repealed. I mean, listen, I think there needs to be a rethink on the way that we deal with big tech, as I said. But, right now, we can just force them to pay of their pocket by saying, well, you're no longer acting as a platform now. You are acting as a publisher. So, well, people can sue you for libel now, and you're going to have to deal with that. And when you want to stop doing that, then we can talk again, and you can obviously get your protections back. But right now, the 230 might as well not exist, because it's, at least that part of 230 might as well not exist, because Section 230 might as well not exist within the greater bill. I've forgotten the name of the bill, because it's not being applied. The law isn't being applied to these companies. So why? Because obviously they've just got, a bunch of different. There's so many people with special interest that include Facebook and Twitter sitting in Congress that nothing's ever going to be done about it. So, but between now and the next election in 4 years' time, or the next presidential election in 4 years' time, we have to just keep highlighting this, and we have to keep talking about it, and we have to make people aware of what's going on, and we need to pressure both sides, really, both Democrats and Republicans, into saying, no, we're not going to stand for this anymore. You're not just going to, be, you're not going to allow these people to just lobby you to the point that they basically can do what they want and they're protected under the law. They have to be treated like everyone else. They have special protections right now under certain conditions, and they're not fulfilling their side of the condition. I basically agree with the idea, the principle that they can't be expected to filter through all of the stuff that people say. Those people themselves should be accountable for what they say, and Twitter and Facebook should be just places of where people can speak freely, but obviously face the consequences of that if they're slandering people or whatever. But that's not the situation. We've just created this. We've allowed them to turn the biggest online communities into echo chambers, which is just bad for democracy. And there's absolutely no doubt about it.
And people kind of think that this is just a natural thing that happens, being turned into an echo chamber. Well, no, it's like an actual action and effect. These things are echo chambers because they want it that way. The owners want it that way. But I mean, I think we've been coming up to the end of the stream now, I think, aren't we? Do you have anything else to say on that one? Or?
No, I was just about to suggest the same because I'm losing my voice a little bit.
Yeah. So thanks a lot for watching and listening, you guys and girls, and whatever you might identify as the Apache attack helicopters in the audience.
Such a low-hanging fruit of a joke, isn't it? But yeah, go on.
Are you criticizing my my humor? Yeah.
Well,
it doesn't matter.
Yeah, just I don't know. It's always the Apache helicopter, isn't it? Why can't it at least pick a different? What's that thing with the two blades? The Chinook. A Chinook.
You like a Chinook? No, I like the old Soviet Hind. I think they're quite a sexy little helicopter. So why don't you tell us? Tell us in the comment section what if you manage to make it through the live stream. We're gonna know this, okay? If you manage to make it through this entire live stream, tell us what is your favorite. Which attack helicopter would you identify as? And then we will know that you watched the entire live stream, and we'll give you a special present or something. We'll give you a shout out in a video. How's about that? But do leave a comment. Tell us what you thought. Tell us where we can improve as well, because we are still new to live streaming. We'd like to kind of do more with this. Do subscribe, or please consider subscribing if you haven't already, because that will let you join our little community and kind of help us keep in contact with you in terms of when we deliver videos. We deliver videos every day, but you'll know the precise time and everything. Oh, we didn't do a video yesterday, did we? Because illness. So sorry about that as well. But till next time, guys, thank you so much for listening. And we'll see you on the live stream next week. And we'll see you in the video tomorrow.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys. Thank you.